Okay. Hi guys. So here are some of the basic the basic interface for Photoshop. We're going to talk about Photoshop in general. We're going to talk about layers, and we're going to talk about resizing imagery and stuff like that. Now here is an example of, let me see if I can get my, there, you can see this a little better. So this is our project one. So project one is not due this week. It'll be due in week 3. And basically it's a collage of imagery, but we need to resize the imagery. We need to organize them in layers. And there is a little bit of transformation. So I'm gonna show you, it's simple. You can rotate the images and you can arrange them. It doesn't have to look exactly like this, but it's gonna look something like this. Now here's Photoshop. My Photoshop interface is like this light gray. Normally Photoshop is, it's like a dark gray. And you could change that. I'm not going to totally show you that, but I'll just quickly show you if you wanted to do something like that in the future. Under a Mac, it'll be different. I think Mac will say Photoshop and you'll click here and then it'll give you the options for preferences under there. But anyways, I'm on a PC. So here it is, it's preferences for me and interface. And I could click here and here's where you can click the light gray versus dark gray. Here's what you probably can see. Normally you're working at home, so I don't care if you work in dark gray. I like light gray because it enables me to see the differences between some of my tools, like the direct select. Oh, well, let me hit okay. Direct select versus path selection. This is basically the direct select, and this is the selection tool from Illustrator. And sometimes if it's like a black arrow on a black background, sometimes it's hard for me to figure out, but I don't care what your interface looks like. Also, you may want to rearrange your panels a little bit. We'll talk about that soon. The main thing we need to worry about today, though, is you want to have your layers open. Let me see here. This thing is in the way. Here, I can do this. Let's see what we got here. I think the normal setup is, I don't want to screw it up. I'm going to screw it up. Essentials. That's not essentials. Hold on, let me reset essentials. Really? Oh, are they right here? They're right here. Okay, so these are the essentials normally, right? And so this is probably what you're going to have, except it'll be a dark color. So what do we have here? We have layers. If you don't have this and you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do with my panels? You go to this, there's a little arrow here. There's an arrow and that's for your panel setup. You would want to go to essentials and probably reset essentials to get this. Then we can close this stuff. For today, we don't need libraries, so I would drag this out and I would close it. We don't need it today. We need color swatches. We need layers, and properties is pretty good. I also have my tools here. So I drag these over here. Let's see, I'm gonna get rid of this. I have this extra bar just for, gosh, what is this? History. I don't normally use history. So I'm just gonna move it out and I'm just gonna close it. I don't need history at the moment. Here's my tools. I'm just gonna push it right here so it connects. Let's see, I got layers, swatches. One more thing I like to do is swatches. I'm going to pull it out. So I pulled out swatches. I like swatches to be separate from my color. Now we're not going to use a lot of color today, but this is just something you can look at in the future. If I want to position this as a separate panel underneath my, my color and my properties here, what I can do is I can drag this with my mouse. And if the little bar highlights blue directly in between those two and I let go, it will place it there. So it placed my swatches panel there. And the book kind of talks about this in chapter 1. This isn't super essential, but it may help you. So I'll talk about it a little bit. So anyways, but we don't need that much stuff today. Just like Illustrator, all your panels are under the window menu. So like, let's say there's a panel that you want. Let's say I'm not going to close my layers, but let's say my layers did get closed. I can go under window menu. So I go window and I can find layers right here, right? And there's other panels in here as well, like character panel. Character panel is the main typography panel for changing type and stuff like that. and brushes and stuff like that. So they're all in here. So that's the same as Illustrator. So that's refreshing. Anyways, for today, I'm going to go back to my setup though, but you can set up your panels. We need layers more than properties at the moment. Like I might recommend you would do this, like maybe your layers might be separate and you can make it a big panel. Actually, this will be useful for homework, not necessarily for today in class. But anyways, I have mine usually pretty big. And you might want to put it with properties, like over here, so it's in the middle. It's up to you, but you can organize your panels as however you like. Once they're organized, you can save it. I've saved it. You would go to this little arrow here. It's like a little, it's a little arrow that points down, and it's, I forget what they call it. It's like it's not set up. But anyways, this is where you set up your panels, right? And I could go new, workspace. It's probably called workspace. So I could go new workspace and I can name it and it will save my setup. So you may want to just set up your panels the way you want to work on it, right? Anyways, I did save mine. So I saved mine as, I think it was Smith Paint is what I was using. Yeah, and that's pretty good for our class today, but I just want you to be aware of that. Okay, big deal, you say. Yeah, I know. You might want to know. Okay, anyways, I'm going to move this up here. Okay, so here we have a window of our project. Whenever we open a new, in fact, I'll open a new file. I'm going to go File, Open, just so you can see it. File, I go Open. And if I was a student, I would open up one of those images that we need for the homework, right? So you don't have to do this yet. You can just watch. I just want to show you. Student files. So like, for instance, I'm just going to get the consumer image. So I'm going to get her. No, maybe we'll get the denim. Denim. Okay, and I hit Open. Now, when I open that, wow. Oh, okay. That took way longer than it should. I got a fast computer too, so I don't know what's up with that. But what it did was is it put it up here in this. Huh? Ooh, maybe, I hope I didn't save over it. Okay, next. Concrete? Oh no. That means I saved over my denim. Sweet. I can't imagine I did that. I have it somewhere else. But anyways, you can see that it keeps my files separate here. This one's gone. You're gone, denim. Concrete looks like cookies and cream, ice cream. We have the project sample. Oh, and then here's that nail, right? So these are just some images, but it keeps them organized, kind of like Illustrator. So that's kind of the same, which is kind of nice too. Just something to keep in mind. One thing that's different between Photoshop and Illustrator is that you can't work out in this gray area. In this gray area, I'm going to put it back to concrete. In this gray area, it's just a matte. You can't work there. In Illustrator, you're able to work out here, and it was kind of awesome. Not so in Photoshop, and it is what it is, but I do miss working out here. Whatever. But this is all you can see. It doesn't mean that your image goes, sometimes your image will be larger than your artboard, and it might go a little beyond your picture frame that you can see, and that's okay. But anyways, it's just something to keep in mind. Now let's see, let's look at some of these tools here. I hope I didn't save over that. That's pretty funny. Okay, so you should be able, how come I can't see the green? I can't see the green. Can you guys see me? Oh my gosh. I'm sharing, right? It says I'm sharing. Stop sharing. Chat me if you can't, if I'm not sharing this for some reason. I should be sharing. Anyways, normally I see a green, there's a green border, and I don't see my green border, so that's freaking me out. But let me know if in the chat if
you can't see it.
You can? Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay, never mind. Normally there's a green outline, and it's, like I said, it's not showing, so it was freaking me out. So I just want to make sure. Okay, great. Thanks, guys. So now we have, here are our basic tools. I'm just going to move them over so you can see them. There's a lot of different tools. Let's see, what do we have? We have an eyedropper. An eyedropper selects color. Boy, let me get a color to select. So here, if I want to select this yellow, I can click on it with my eyedropper, and you'll notice that it put it down here. This is similar to the fill that we had in Illustrator, but there's no stroke option. It's just foreground color and background color, right? And so our foreground color, because I selected yellow, it's yellow. Background color we don't use very often, but sometimes we use it for certain things. Like if you delete, it'll delete to the background color. I can pick this blue, blue, purple. You get the idea. So eyedropper. There's also a paintbrush. We're not going to use the paintbrush very much, but if I could paint. Let's see, let me pick a color. Pink. So I can paint. And if I want to undo, it's Control Z, right? And if I paint a couple times, right? So I did some paintbrush strokes. If I want to undo more than once, I just press Control Z more than once. Now, if you're on a Mac, if I ever say Control something, it's Command something. So I'm saying Control Z because I'm on a PC, but for a Mac, it'll be Command Z, right? Anyways, I'm going to hit Control Z. I'm going to hit Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, and Control Z. So if you press Control Z more than once, it will undo more than once, which is kind of awesome. If I want to undo my undo, it should be Control Shift Z, Control Shift Z, right? You get the idea. So Control Z, Control Z, Control. So Control Shift Z will undo your undo, right? Complicated, huh? The nice thing is it used to be different in Photoshop, but they made it more like Illustrator, which is good because you're accustomed to that. So that's great. So anyways, keep that in mind. That's the same. That's easy. There is a, what else do I want to talk about? Well, I'll just tell you what these are. These are the move tools. I need to have more than one layer to move stuff. Let's see. I'll show you. Move tool. Okay, this is a, don't do this, just watch. This is a rectangular marquee. I made a new layer. This is just for information. I'm going to fill this with pink. Alt Delete is the shortcut to fill. Control D is the shortcut to deselect. Don't worry about that stuff yet. I'm just saying it. Now I can move this layer. This is layer 1. It has like a pink rectangle on that layer. I can move this around by using my move tool. So I can move it around. It looks like it's just moving just the rectangle, but it's actually moving the whole layer. Here, let's see here. Watch. Here's my background layer. If I move my background layer, you'll see that the whole thing moves, right? So I don't know, just be aware of that. So that's the move tool, Once in a while, I might accidentally call it the selection tool. That may simply be because it works in a very similar way to the selection tool in Illustrator. And you can select with it, but anyways, it's officially the move tool, 4 arrows, right? This is the marquee. I made a marquee selection. Okay, big deal. There's a lasso. A lasso is you can make a selection. When you have a selection, it's like a stencil. So like if I paint or copy in there, it only copies or paints that area. So I'm going to go paintbrush. If I paint, notice how it doesn't, it's probably hard to see on that background, but whatever. You can see it's only painting inside that selection. I can fill it in if I want. So that's a selection. I could have filled it instead of using my paintbrush. Fill, the shortcut for fill is Alt Delete, and that will fill with your foreground color. That's my preferred way to fill. Other teachers just use the paint bucket, but I don't use the paint bucket, but I'll show you in the future. Now, I still have my selection, so to deselect, I can press Control D. And how do I know it's not selected? That little marching ants border is gone, so that means it's not selected anymore. Now if I paint, I can paint anywhere. It's like, right? It's like there's no constraints because I don't have a selection anymore. Okay. And you can see that it's all painting on layer 1. Okay. There's a clone stamp that kind of copies and that it copies part of your image and kind of paints it somewhere else. We'll worry about that in the future. History brush is weird. History brush is kind of like an eraser that it kind of shows you right there. It's not super useful. So the most important thing to know about the history brush is not to confuse it with the regular paintbrush. So the regular paintbrush is good. I'm not so fond of the history brush, but it has its purposes. We have an eraser. Oh, cool. Here, I don't. So the eraser, I have this paint layer, layer 1, and I can erase some of these lines, right? I can even erase my rectangle if I want. Okay, great. And then there's a gradient tool. This will make a gradient. We'll talk about that later. A gradient, like Illustrator. We have smudge. This is for like photography, right? So for photography, if you want to smudge or blend some clouds, smudge. Then we have, I don't know, what do we got here? Dodge and burn. These are for photography, like making things brighter, darker. Pen tool. The pen tool, just like Illustrator, is super important, but we use it differently in Photoshop. Normally we don't draw with the pen tool very much in Photoshop. Some people do, but not typically. If you're going to draw like a garment or some kind of detailed illustration with the pen tool, you're probably going to do it in Illustrator. And then you're going to save your Illustrator file and open it in Photoshop. It's more common to do it that way. But you can use the pen tool in Photoshop. It's a little trickier. The pen itself works the same. It's just what we do with those pen shapes afterwards is a little different and weird. And we'll talk about that in the future. Normally, though, we use the pen tool for masks. We will use it for a vector mask. We'll trace around like a handbag or a dress. And the pen tool enables us to have a nice, sharp mask. So anyways, talk more about that in the future. Type tool, you do type, obviously. Now, these tools are different. We have they call it the path selection tool, but it's the selection tool from Illustrator. And we have the direct select. What's this for? This is for if you draw with the pen tool or other vector shapes in Photoshop. Okay, we have vector shapes here. These are like rectangles, ellipses. They're a little different. What they do is typically, you can use them different ways, but a vector shape like an ellipse, it'll make a whole layer just for that one shape, usually. There's all kinds of different things. Anyways, let's not worry about that right now, but it's something to keep in mind. Oh, we got the little hand tool. I never use the hand tool, but let's see. If I'm zoomed in, right, and I want to like get to the other side of my document, I could use my hand tool. So let's see, a hand, and you just hold it and you drag around. Some people like it. Like, that's cool. I use the bars on the edges of my border. So I just do this. I use the borders, you know, and then sometimes you have a scroll wheel. I have a scroll wheel on my mouse, so I can scroll up and down. So, but here's the hand tool. Some people like it. Let's see. Oh, the rotate. I'm not going to rotate my screen, but sometimes when people are drawing on their screen, they want to like rotate their paper. And so they have a rotate option. It's useful if you are an artist. And we'll talk about that. Finally, we have a zoom tool. Zoom tool makes you zoom in. Like I can zoom into this. This looks like cookies and cream ice cream. It's not though, it's granite, but whatever. Anyways, and now I can zoom in by clicking normally. If I hold the Alt key, I get a minus sign in my zoom tool. And if I hold the Alt key down and click, I can zoom away, right? So that's just the zoom tool. Just like Illustrator, you can press Control plus to zoom in, Control plus to zoom in, Control minus to zoom away, right? I do that a lot too. One thing I love about the zoom tool, because I do paintings and illustrations, is like sometimes I want to zoom in on a real specific spot, like this piece of cookie in my concrete. So what I can do is I can drag, unless I don't have scrubby zoom on, good. So I can drag a little marquee and it will zoom into that spot, right? But there is a scrubby zoom option that you have to turn off. I'm not going to find it because my zoom stuff is in the way. But if it doesn't work, if it kind of zooms in and out, it's because you have scrubby zoom on. So you uncheck scrubby zoom. And then what you can do is you can drag a box and it will zoom into that. And so I find that very useful. I love it. But you may or may not. I don't know. Anyways, what's this? This is something new. What do we got here? Oh, the frame tool. Okay. So this is something that we may or may not use. InDesign has this frame tool where you have a frame that's independent of your picture. And you can kind of see in that little video, watch your little video later, like the frame stays the same size, but you can resize your image inside the frame. We might use it, but anyways, that's new. And normally you do that in InDesign. So it's something to keep in mind. Okay. Now we have down here, we have our foreground color and our background color. And then here we have default black and white. It's like this little, I don't know, it's a little button. What do they call it? Default, okay, oh, default foreground and background, right? Okay, it's black and white, similar to Illustrator. That's useful if you just want to get black and white. And then they have this little switch, or do they call it swap? Switch, okay, whatever. If you click on this little arrow here, it will switch your background and your foreground color, just for your information. This is a weird, this is quick mask mode. We don't need that very often, so I rarely use it. I use regular layer masks, and it's just a different way to do masks. It's a little tricky. And then finally, this is the, oh my gosh, I'm gonna do it. Let's see here. This is how you view your stuff. And you might click this on accident and it might screw you up. So here we go, let's screw it up. Click here. So that's what, full screen? Click here. Let's see, full screen. This is full screen. And then I think if you hit escape, escape goes back to normal. So, but this is just different ways to show your project on your computer screen. What it's really for is when your boss comes around, and your boss doesn't want to see all your panels. They just want to see your beautiful project you're working on. So you go full screen mode. And then they look at it and like, okay, cool. And then when they walk away, you just go back to escape. So escape does it typically. Anyways, that's something to know about. We'll talk more about these in the future, but I want you to have a general idea about what they are. Now let's talk, let's see if there's any questions on the way. Let's see. Okay, good, no, nothing serious so far. Let's talk about layers. So layers are a little different in Photoshop as they are in Illustrator. In Illustrator, a layer was like a folder that held every, it's distracting. A folder in Illustrator held every single line, shape, every little, everything, every word, everything was put into this folder. That was a layer in Illustrator. In Photoshop, though, it's different. Let's see. You can see my layers here. Let's see here. Can I move them down? In layers, think of a layer as a piece of glass. Piece of glass that you can draw on, or you can stick a picture on, right? In fact, here, let me get another layer real quick. I'll just quickly open another one. Let's see what we got here. Got the neon man. I'm gonna open him up. Here he is. Let's see, I'm gonna drag him into my project. So let's see, I'm gonna drag him. Where was I in here? Go in there. Oh gosh, okay, I gotta do it this way. Okay, I'm gonna close this. Okay, so in this project, I have 3 layers now. I have the neon man, I have my weird pink paint, and I have my concrete, right? So, and I can name my layers. So later we'll have to do this. So I'll just show you. I can double click here. I can name this layer. This is gonna be whatever, man, person. This is my pink stuff. I'm just gonna say just paint. I'll just call it paint. Paint. And then this is my concrete. And I just type it in. So how do I, and enter. So how do I rename a layer? I click on the name. You might have to double click or double click, and then you just type and you press enter, and that's how you can rename your layers. Okay, great. I'm supposed to make these into smart objects. I'll talk a little bit more about this soon. I will. So to make a layer into a smart object, I'm going to show you later again, but I'll just quickly show you. It's easy. You go option. Option for layers. I'm going too fast. So here we go. Layers. The options are these 3 lines. You just click on it. And then I'm going to go to, let's see, where is it? Hello, smart object. Oh no. Why are you doing this to me? Oh, here. I'm sorry. Here it is. I found it. Okay, convert to smart objects. Sorry. Anyways, that'll never happen to you. Okay, so here it is. Now, how do I know it's a smart object? It has this little picture here. It looks like a square within a document is the little picture. And basically what that means is that's what it means. A smart object is this image is, even though it's in my project, it's saved separately from this project. And what's the benefit of that, you may ask? The benefit is it saves that resolution for that image. There's other purposes, but the main purpose is it saves that resolution. So because this person man is a smart object, their resolution is, I think it's 300 pixels per inch. Actually, it's not because I didn't change it, but let's imagine it was 300 pixels per inch. It'll stay that way. Then if I save my whole document as a lower resolution, like 150, which is low and not good, because this is a smart object, it still remembers that resolution for that layer, that picture. And that's good. That's the main purpose for smart objects. And it's a good one, and you'll see why, but I'll talk more about it later. Anyways, I have layers. So right now I have 3 layers. Let me move some of this stuff out of the way. I want to centralize this. No, don't do that. Okay, so I have 3 layers. So I have here, he's a person. It's a man, but person. How do I know that that's a man? I don't know, it does look like, who knows what that is? That's a person. Person, paint, and concrete. So one thing you want to keep in mind is the order. So whatever's on top is in front, right? Just like Illustrator. So if I move my pink layer or my paint, if I move this to be on top, I can just drag it to be on top. You'll notice that the pink paint is on top. If I move my concrete to be on top, I'm going to just drag this to be on top. Now you can't see the pink paint or the man, right? Okay, big deal, you say. Yeah, I know. But that's something to keep in mind. So I'm going to put the person back on top. I'm going to leave the concrete on the bottom. Who cares about that? Then you can also hide a layer. So right now the person is visible, but if I click on the eyeball, it'll hide. The layer is still there. It's just hidden. That way it doesn't get in the way. Like if maybe I want to work on the concrete, I want to change the color of the concrete, so I just hide the person layer temporarily and I work on the concrete, right? Whatever, and then I can make it visible again by clicking on the empty box for the eyeball, and it kind of shows it. So that's good. Another thing I can do with a layer is I can lock it. So the best lock is this little black lock right here. So first you have to select your layer, select it, and click on the black lock. Okay, so now that layer is locked. I can't move it, I can't paint on it. Watch, I'll show you. Can't move it, can't paint on it, won't let me. Makes a noise. Okay. If I want to, it's a good way to protect your layers. So if I want to work with this layer, I can just click on the lock and now I can move it. So I can move this person around. Okay. One reason why that may be useful for you is because, well, it'll keep your layers safe, but it's real easy to delete layers in Photoshop. And so in fact, I think if I just hit delete, let's see, this is the latest version, so let's see if they changed it. But if I hit delete, yep, it's gone, right? So I'm going to undo, Control Z to undo, right? So delete will delete a layer. I think backspace will delete. Yeah. Yeah. So see how easy that is? So if you lock the layer though, it better not happen. Let's find out. Yeah, so it won't work. So by locking a layer, it's protected. And that's useful. As you get awesome at Photoshop, I only lock things that are essential, but you'll be more careful and it won't be as big of an issue. So, but yeah, you can definitely lock layers. There are different ways to lock stuff. We can maybe talk about this in the future. But there's like a lock movement. So like instead of, I can click here, lock movement. That means I can paint on it, but I can't move it. So here it won't let me move. This one's lock. Oh, really? Oh, it's because it's a smart object. Okay, here we go. If I select this one and I click on lock pixels, now I can't paint on it, but I can move it. So I can move the concrete. I can move the concrete, but I can't paint on it. Okay, big deal. Normally, I just lock everything. Normally, I just go the black lock. So it's just like black lock and can't do anything and it's safe. It's just easier. In Illustrator, remember how I told you that complicated thing about arrangement and how, like I said, you don't just drag stuff to be on top of each other. You use arrangement. You like right click and you do arrangement. In Photoshop, we don't have very many, well, we don't have as many layers. So it's okay to just drag them. So let me show you. So like I just drag them. So here's my paint layer. I'm gonna drag to the top. But let's see if I can use the arrangement option. I don't even know if I can right click to do it. Let's find out. Nope, let's see. It would be under here, right? Let's see. Under here. Here it is, arrange. So this is similar to, you don't have to do it. You can just drag it up and down in your layers panel. But if I want, I can send to back. So here's send to back, and it put it all the way on the bottom. But Photoshop's a little easier to drag up and down. When you drag, there'll be a blue highlight. It's kind of hard to see here, but if there's a blue highlight in between the concrete and person layer, if I let go, it'll put it in the middle there. But anyways, it's up to you. If you want to use arrangement, you can use the layer menu, but it's not that essential. Finally, let's talk about opacity. So like I can select my paint layer. So here's my paint layer, it's selected, and I can lower the opacity. So here's opacity, it's at the top of your, layer panel is what I'm trying to say. And I can lower the opacity. So I can go like, this is 60%. And you can see that the pink is transparent, right? And that's super fun, right? Here, let me go to the man. Now the man is a smart object. I should be able to do it. Yeah. Okay. So, and you can see that the images are starting to blend together. Are they blending well? Not necessarily, but you can see it. Now, let me just quickly show you, boy, I'm going to show you later. I'm going to show you I'm going to show you a quick blending mode. Notice that there's a lot of black. There's a question here. Notice that there's a lot of black on this person image. And that's a great opportunity to change the blending mode. Blending modes are how you see a layer. So for instance, currently it's set to normal, so you see the image normally. But if I click on this and change the blending mode to lighten, oh, here's lighten, you'll notice that the black disappeared. Oh, this is nice, it previews it so you can see it. So here's darker, the color, well, the color got darker. Let's see, let's go to whatever. You can see all the cool different results. Multiply, what it's doing is it's taking that orange yellow and applying it to the colors on the layers underneath. And so, but the black remains. So it's really neat. Lighten kind of lightens those colors by applying it to the layers, but then the black disappears. So these are just things you can keep in mind. And then what's this exclusion? Exclusion and difference are like inverse. They're like inverse colors. So remember that person was like orange and yellow. Well, now they're like blue and green. And it depends on where they're overlapping too. Like when they overlap the pink, it's kind of greenish. When they overlap the white or the light gray, it's kind of like a blue. So, but anyways, these are fun things that are really neat. But we'll talk more about that in the future. But that's a layer option. Okay. So I talked about the basics. I talked about the basic tools. I talked about layers. I talked about zooming in and out. I talked about briefly how to change your panels and stuff. Your panels might be all over the place. That's okay because our class is well, it's remotely, so it's a little different than normal. One thing I want to remind you is, remember, all your panels are under window. So like, let's say you accidentally close out your layers, you can always find them here. There's all kinds of other stuff in here as well. If you ever want to make a new document, normally they give you a page, like when you open up Photoshop and it'll be like, create new document. But if you don't have that open, you can always go File, New to create a new document, right? And, and that's very similar to Illustrator, so that's all good. So that's it. Those are the basics. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop recording, but then I'm going to see if there's any questions. And then let's see, it's almost break time. So I'm going to stop recording. So let's see, I'm going to stop recording. Stop recording.